Victory podcast series. My name is Tracy Cook, and this series gives a voice to those that have overcome all sorts of obstacles to dare greatly to share their real stories. Amazing humans that have seen hope, risen above those adversities to go on to become victorious, to inspire others to do the same. And today I want to give a really big warm welcome to an amazing human. She's got a very powerful story to share with you, to draw inspiration from, to connect with, and we'll be sharing out her links as well to be able to connect with her as well. It's Adriana Lewin. Thank you very much for being a guest on the Victim to Victory podcast series. How are you? And thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I am doing just, I would say, well. We're doing really well, though. A little bit, I guess, about me real quick is the reason why I'm doing so well is because my 4-year-old finished his cancer treatment 1 week ago, so he got to ring the bell. So, yeah, we're in a really good place. We're doing well.
What an amazing pivotal point to be able to ring that bell, especially going through cancer treatment. Now, just a little bit of a background about Adriana as well. She is a licensed professional counselor in Texas, and she's a mum to 3 amazing, beautiful little humans. And we're going to be sharing Adriana's story about one of her children that is a cancer survivor and very proudly got to ring that bell in that pivotal moment. And she's a wife to her very best friend. And, she is an extrovert by nature, a wounded healer, and a founder of a family chemotherapy website and podcast as well. And I really hope that the messages that Adriana is going to share with you today will really help you overcome if you're going through this kind of cancer treatment with your child as well. We really hope that you draw on Adriana's strength and her journey today. So take us to get to know your journey, and obviously there's a lot of obstacles that you've overcome as part of this journey and made you who you are and your family as well. So where does this all kind of start for you, Adriana?
I'm going to go back before my child had a cancer diagnosis. I feel like my whole life has really been me overcoming obstacle after obstacle. I've From the time that I was young, I was actually I guess you could say, a sexual trauma survivor. Um, I was sexually assaulted for several years when I was really young. And I remember having an outcry when I was in elementary. And when I told a peer, that person didn't actually believe me. And I was like third grade, that kid, it's not their fault. They're third graders too, they didn't understand. It took me another 10 years to actually come out and outcry again is what we call it, to outcry and tell somebody that I had been sexually assaulted as a young kid. And I was quickly immersed into the court system, basically, where I had to, like, my parents forced me into the process of pressing charges against the person who had assaulted me. And that was a really rough process for being 16 at the time. And it was really hard to cope through that. But I ironically thought that I was coping perfectly fine. And I didn't realize it until I was probably in my early 20s that I had really just stuffed it all underneath and didn't ever cope with it. And it was very apparent through some of my life decisions and my lifestyle changes stemming from that moment in time where I did have an outcry and all of a sudden everything blew up on me and I had to go to court and tell a bunch of random strangers and, feel responsible for putting somebody in jail, even that's where he belongs. But as a 16-year-old, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for putting somebody in jail. Like it's a lot of, a lot of responsibility for
a lot of pressure.
Yeah, pressure. Yeah. And Yeah, so I didn't make the best choices, and it took me a long time to kind of find my path. And then um, I found my best friend eventually once I kind of had healed myself. I had become a professional counselor at that point when I met my husband. I was going through grad school, and I had done a lot of self healing and just understanding what I had been through. And then dated my husband. We got married. We had kids, and then about 2 years ago, my younger brother, who was my roommate in college, and we were just very close, um, he passed away very suddenly. And the doctors couldn't figure out what happened to him. Really, he was dead for 24 minutes and they brought him back to life. And then because of the hypoxia, just the brain damage from the lack of oxygen, he passed away a few days after that. And so that was just a very traumatic event for me. And honestly, on that one, it took me a minute to figure out how to cope with that. And about a year later is when finally found myself in a place where I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to go back to counseling. I had a newborn at the time when my brother passed away. Um, and so I felt like it was the right time to go back to work. And I kid you not, I went back to work, and a week later, I found out my kid had cancer. My 4-year old, at that time, he was 3 years old. I found out he had cancer. And um, that was on the night before Thanksgiving for for us Americans, right? It's in November. We celebrate when, I guess technically, when Christopher Columbus came across, and there was a big gathering with all the people, the pilgrims. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't even know what our own history is anymore for Thanksgiving. So all I know is we eat a lot of turkey at this point. We all gather as a family and eat a lot of turkey and mashed potatoes. So
Oh.
um so yeah, so it was literally the day before Thanksgiving for us. And then the next day, um, we decided to go down to Houston because we live up in Dallas. And so we went down to Houston and um, travel to get help. Basically, we couldn't get anybody to help diagnose our child and do a biopsy. So we went to Houston, and that's when we received the news that, yeah, it was in fact malignant. We were still kind of holding out some hope that maybe it was something benign, but we wouldn't know until they did a biopsy. And so,
And
um,
this is your son or your daughter?
my son,
Your
yeah,
son. And what's your son's name?
Evan,
Evan. And he
yeah,
was 3.
he was 3 at the time. He was 1 month
Wow.
shy of his 4th birthday. So, as you can imagine, that was a very traumatic experience. And it was just very fast. Everything was really fast. And so you don't really have a whole lot of time to have emotions over what's happening at the very beginning, because it's just like, okay, your kid has cancer. We got to tell you what the plan is. You have to help make decisions. Then we got to get him into surgery. And then we're going to start chemo. And then we got to start, whatever radiation therapy. And they kind of just keep throwing you in here into these different procedures, and you don't have a whole lot of time to make decisions or to process. Because I mean, yeah, I'm going to be devastated as I'm watching my child um, with the side effects of chemo, but I don't have time to allow those emotions in, because I have to be there to support him and show him that, we're going to make it through together. So, uh, yeah, so basically during all of that, I feel like part of the challenge is, even I was a therapist, or I am a therapist. And so going through this as a therapist, I was so surprised to see the lack of resources for families and parents, especially, that are going through it. And so literally they're like, oh, your kid just got diagnosed and you got decisions to make. And by the way, here's this book and this book and this book and this book, and here's some handouts. And hopefully you have enough time to read that. And you think you probably should, being that you're in a hospital like all the time, but it doesn't work that way. And so, um, I eventually just got to the point where I was like, you know what? There's a reason why I am a counselor. And by all means, it does not mean that I did not feel the feelings that people who don't go to therapy feel. Like, I felt all the feelings. I felt the depression. I felt the anxiety. I still feel the anxiety. But I feel like I have more practice in learning how to control it than an average person, but it doesn't mean that I don't fail at it either, but I still have the tools in my belt that I'm like, okay, I got to bring this one out and, tell myself to calm down and to catch my thoughts and all that stuff. So during this process, I decided that, you know what, I might as well start this website for other families going through pediatric cancer and just help validate like what we're going through, because it's such a small community. And half of us are like, no, not half of us, all of us, all of us are struggling during and after treatment. And so that's kind of that's basically my backstory, just who I am and what I'm doing.
And how's it that kind of situation? Because everything, like you said, was happening really quickly. So how did that affect the rest of your family as well?
Yeah. So that, it affected the whole family. And we had a lot of decisions to make about my oldest son is 6 now, but at the time he was 5. And so he was not quite in kinder yet. We had him in a transitional kinder because he's what we call summer babies. And so he would have been the youngest in his class, and we didn't want him to be the youngest. We wanted him to be at least, the oldest, one of the oldest ones. And so we decided to hold him for 1 year just for that. And we were very blessed that we did that, because at that point, his school wasn't taking attendance or anything. So we had to make decisions in terms of, do we pull him from school? Do we let him keep going to school? What is that dynamic going to look like in our own home if we do let him go to school? And it affected just the logistics of things, but it also affected relationships, because brother's getting a lot of mom time and they're used to me being with them because I was a stay-at-home mom, and so it affected the quality time that I had with all of them actually, because even though I was spending time with Evan, my mind was somewhere else. I was worried about what's going on with the treatment plan and where am I emotionally, and I had a hard time being present for my kids. I mean, I'm going to be flat out honest, because there was just so much going on. So,
and did the mum guilt kind of creep in at that stage as well? We hear about this mum guilt. You're just trying to be everything for everybody and be for yourself as well. Were you experiencing any of that as well, because you couldn't be fully present for the other children, or that just took a back seat as well?
I did have mom guilt. I would say I still have some of it as well. But when you're in the pediatric cancer world, I feel like you feel like your house is on fire and everybody's inside the house, and you're trying to figure out how to get everybody out and yourself out unscathed, and yeah, I mean, everything, it's just chaotic. You're literally in crisis mode. And so you focus on, what do I need to get done now? Like, who needs the most attention at this very moment? And some days it was Evan and some days it was the other children, and yeah, there's a lot of mom guilt for sure, because they don't get the best of you, Oh my gosh. I remember saying that to my therapist and like one of my friends. I was like, I feel, especially my daughter, like my sweet, darling little daughter, she was not used to me being gone. She was barely, when my son got diagnosed, her birthday was a week later, and she was turning 2. And she was super attached to me, mommy's girl, didn't go with anybody, stranger danger. I mean, she was all moms, and she went from seeing me all the time to not seeing me. And that was super hard on her. And it was super hard on me, because I knew she needed me and I couldn't be there for her. And so, yeah, there's a lot of mom guilt for sure.
Because I think we don't generally kind of talk about that as much, do we? Because we are expected to wear all these multiple hats, not only as mum but as women and wives and you know, sisters and daughters. We're expected to wear all these multiple hats. And when I talk to people about mum guilt, it's just always see people hesitate before they kind of go, yeah, I did, you know. There's so I really respect your transparency on that and your openness about that, because you know, it's hard enough dealing with one situation than to have all those other different layers on top of it as well. So to chunk that down and to kind of break that down and in full transparency, I really applaud you on that. So thank you so much for your
Thanks.
honesty about that, because dealing with a situation as critical as what you were with your son, with Evan, then you know, how long was he in hospital for? His treatment went for, and can you take us through that journey, perhaps?
Yeah, so he was diagnosed on Thanksgiving, and basically, my child was diagnosed with it's called embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma. It was orbital, so it was a solid tumor that was behind his eye, um, and so his treatment plan basically was 42 weeks. Every 3 weeks, we were expected to go to the hospital and be admitted for an overnight chemo, which was like our more intense chemo. And we would get discharged within about 24 hours as long as he could keep his food down and stuff. But then every single week we would go in and have to do like just a quick infusion of chemo. Literally, it was like less than 5 minutes once they finally got the medicine. But the whole process being at the hospital is literally like you walk in and by the time you're done, it's been like 3 hours on a good day, sometimes 4, you know. It's just it's a long process. It's a long day. So yeah, every week we had at least one chemo. There was a time he did about 6 weeks of radiation, proton beam radiation, and um, during that time, he didn't have to do chemo, but we were still going every single day, Monday through Friday, to radiation. And he was getting anesthesia every single day for 6 weeks. And yeah, 42 weeks later, technically, well, the treatment plan was 42 weeks later, but it took us about 46 weeks for him to finish because he had a few delays because he had a hard time meeting counts for chemo because technically, what was it? That his white blood cell count was really low, and so from the chemo, so we would have to wait
And
for
did
him to
Evan
be a little
know what
better.
was going on? Was he a brave little soldier during all of it, or did it scare him? Obviously, it would have. How did you explain what was happening to him as parents?
Yeah, so he knew. Ironically, someone I grew up with, their child was diagnosed with a different type of solid tumor, I believe, neuroblastoma. Um, they were diagnosed months before my son was diagnosed, and they had caught a picture online through social media of this little girl going through chemo. And so they asked me about it, and I told them as much as I knew how, as well as I knew how to explain what a tumor was to a 3 and a 5-year-old, you know. And so when we found ourselves in the situation where Evan had a tumor, um, I talked to him and his brother, and I let them know what was going on. And my 5-year-old has more of an understanding of death because of my younger brother who passed away. And so he, immediately asked us if Evan would die. And that was really hard and traumatic to answer. Evan hasn't ever asked questions about death or anything. The way we just explained it to him was that um, basically he had what we called like a little tiny rock in his body that came out of nowhere and started to grow. And we had to shrink it. And that's what the chemo was there to do, is to shrink it and hopefully take it away and out of his body. And he understood it from that notion that he was sick. And surprisingly, Evan, Evan surprised me and everyone that he's ever come in contact with in clinic or in the hospitals, because he is really, really brave for his age. Like, the times that he would get pokies, he would not, like kids at that age, instinctually, they try to grab it and like protect themselves. He wouldn't. He would just like panic and then allow them to do what he needed to do. And I would say within the first 2 months after that, he understood the routine of it, and he wouldn't even really cry, which is like kind of abnormal for that age. And then I started him in play therapy, and then he started crying until it got better. And then he finally got back to his like normal, I can handle this. I can do this. I'm strong and brave. And I don't know if part of that has to do with us being so transparent and also validating, like, I know this is really scary. We're just going to breathe through this. Like, yes, it's okay to be scared. Yes, it's okay to be mad. I'm mad too. I wish you didn't have to go through this. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it, or if it's just his personality, or maybe a combination of mom and him, because at this time COVID had started already here in the US. We were about 13 weeks in, I guess, into the treatment plan when COVID hit, and I was on my own, with my child. My husband couldn't come anymore because they had visitation restrictions and stuff. And so
wow. Okay, so there's another layer within itself.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that must have really taken a toll on your husband as well. I mean, I know we can FaceTime and things like that, but it's still not the same as going in and seeing your child in hospital. So how was he coping with that situation? Because that's hard for a dad with his boy not being able to see him. How did that affect him?
He hated it. He hated it. He hated it. That's the only way I could describe it. He just absolutely hated it. And it's honestly, it's unfair and silly, some of the rules. And I know some people will disagree with me. So this might be like, one of those points where people would disagree, but he's allowed to go to the hospital. It was just the weirdest thing, because I could be with my son and he could come and switch with me, but we couldn't switch in the same room. We had to switch downstairs in the lobby, and he would go immediately up to the room where I was just in. So I was like, I don't understand why we can't be in the room at the same time.
That seems really quite ridiculous, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a reasoning somewhere behind it, but not sure on that one. Yeah.
I don't know about that. So, which I tried to make a big stink about it, but that didn't help. So, it didn't
probably
help.
Just venting a little bit about anything at this point as well, right?
I know.
It's just like,
I know, like I'm already angry and I'm not expressing my anger, and this is one channel where I'm like, fine, I'm putting all of my anger into this. You guys need to listen to me.
Yeah, 100%. Justified. Totally justified. So how was he? How long was the treatment again? Sorry, for your son?
So technically 42 weeks.
42 weeks.
Yeah, but it took him 46 weeks to finish it. And we actually have his surgery in this following week. He has surgery to take out the port, and Daddy actually gets to be there. He wasn't supposed to. Apparently they just changed it. And I'm like, thank you, Jesus, because it is the hardest thing to hand off your child to someone knowing that technically they will be okay, but still seeing them go under anesthesia and having to let them go, and you walking away and leaving your child in the hands of somebody else. Like, it's very hard, like emotionally, just very difficult to walk away and be at peace. And for me, I was so afraid about going to the hospital and then having to walk away and not have my husband there next to me. Even like if we both are like both teary-eyed or whatever, right? Like we still at least can sit silently with one another and hold each other's hand and know, like, we get it. We know we're both scared, and we're clinging on to faith and hope that everything will be fine, So yeah.
Having that peace of mind and that support system and that emotional support system in place as well. It's like, there's not even words. It's just hold the hands and cry. You know exactly what each other's thinking and feeling, for sure. Yeah, and I mean it's really hard. I can totally relate. 5 kids, 7 grandkids. I can totally relate. I think we've got a frequent flyers card at the hospitals, ourselves with all the kids and grandkids. But I can so relate, and so much of our audience would relate on, seeing those doors close in their theatre room and you having to walk away and then sit there and wait. That's a feeling that so many parents just have to sometimes do out of necessity, but to go through that emotion, and like you said, you're handing them over in an operating room, and you're just hoping that everyone's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's a trust thing as well, especially during COVID. And having that support system in place is just essential part of the growth and the healing process as well. So to do that alone, it's just it's just horrible. But that's great that your husband and you but they've changed that now, so that's really good timing.
It was. They're like, they literally just changed it the past few days. And I'm like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you.
Oh,
I'll take it.
wonderful.
So,
And how's he feeling about going into the surgery? Is he apprehensive, or he kind of is used to that kind of
Evan?
system? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think part of going through radiation, and this isn't how most kids respond, but like in radiation, I talked to my child that basically he's just going to go, he's going to breathe in some air and he's just going to take a long nap. And so he loves going to get his MRI done and he loves his nap times.
Oh,
I
he's probably drawing on this like little inner strength. It's like this is how he's overcoming his fear.
Yeah.
How wonderful.
Yeah. So we've explained it to him and I can sense a little bit of the apprehension, like, what are they going to do? And we're like, baby, you're just going to go, you're going to smell the gas. You're going to go take a long nap. And when you're awake, your little tiny port is going to be out. Remember how they, and I hated saying this to him, but it's like, remember how they cut your skin right there? And then they put that little piece right there and then they glued it back. I was like, that's what they're going to do, except they're going to unglue it and take it out and then put glue back on and then you'll be done. And so he's like, I take a nap? And then he actually is like, I go see the big giant donut. I'm like, no, baby, it's not a giant donut. You're just going to go take a nap. So yeah,
maybe a little bit odd, but that's his personality, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. What a brave little soldier he is. And
he
how
really
the other kids feeling about this now as well, now that he's got to ring the bell and the family's back together and you're all seeing each other and there's kind of a light at the end of that tunnel. How's that changed your family dynamic again now?
Well, nothing's changed for us. Because COVID is still out. So we're done, yet we're still completely socially distanced, especially since we have to wait for surgery and we can't really afford him being sick right now. So and I can't say afford, not in the like monetary sense, but time and just what we've already gotten this far. We just want him to finish and cross that line and truly be able to tell him like, you're done, and tell our family that we're done. But
are you in lockdown at the moment as well, or just social distancing?
We're just social distancing.
Yep.
Yeah. They still encourage the social distancing. Not everyone does it, but we've stuck to it. It's just been safer for us. So
yep.
So yeah, so it's hasn't changed much really, but then I feel like Evan has started to get along better with his siblings. I know it sounds like so ridiculous, but like they do, like he was frustrated, like Evan was frustrated, and you can see in the way that he would interact with his siblings, not so much with other people, but mainly like his siblings and maybe me, sometimes dad. We were like his safe people. And so he would act out a little more with us. Right. And I would say almost within the week or two of him being done, like I noticed his relationship with his sister was way better than it's ever been. And I'm like, okay, like they've played for at least an hour together, no fighting. This is like amazing, like um but there are things that like I feel like Evan is starting to kind of come out of his self-protective mode maybe and just relaxing a little more. And I know for a fact, like my youngest doesn't understand. Anytime she got to this point right now, because she's almost 3 in December. And she's gotten to the point where she sees me put her down for a nap and she would go, mommy and Evan go to doctor. And I'm like, no, we don't need to go to the doctor, honey. Because every time, I guess it was part of her process. Like I would put her down for a nap and I would take off. And so she's like, you go to doctor? No, baby, no, we don't need to go to the doctor. So I don't know if it's quite, if she's processed the change yet. And then my oldest one, I think he's trying to see how the change is actually going to manifest itself in our day-to-day right now, because everything feels the same to us, to be honest. So
Yeah, it's amazing how kids respond, and they're just so resilient. They're
they
just
are.
so much more resilient than we give them credit for. They can process things a lot faster without all the overthinking and self-limiting beliefs of what us adults do, don't they? They just
I know.
see things for exactly what they are. And I love seeing things through children's eyes, because they're just so pure. They
Yeah.
just think just such pure thoughts. And tell us about where you are right now. Like, I know you're waiting for the hospital. I know there's not much change for your family. You're still social distancing due to COVID. So what are the hopes and dreams for the future?
Whew. Well, as a family, hopes and dreams for the future, we want to go on our Make-A-Wish trip. Have you heard of Make-A-Wish?
Yes.
Yeah. So we want to do our Make-A-Wish trip. My family wants to do the Disney trip, but they're not doing that now. So we're just kind of trying to figure out how to do a Disney trip safely at some point. Um, so yeah, we're trying to figure out how to do Disney safely at some point, and we don't know when that'll happen. But I think um, for us, it's just how do we move forward? Like, what's the new norm? And I feel like I'm in a better place and my son is in a better place. And I'm just very hopeful that will translate across all areas of our life, that we will just all get to a better place together and come out stronger as a family.
Oh, that is so fantastic. What a journey you've been on. You've been through so much. You've come out the other end, and I'm really looking forward to having a look at those Disney photos when you get there with your family and making that dream come true for your family. So for our audience today, what kind of message would you like to leave our audience on today?
Well, I would say that I had this big old thing written out or in my mind, what I would say. But I would say, most of all, we're always going to face challenges in our life. For some, it's like really severe trauma. For some, it's just smaller obstacles. But regardless, your obstacle may feel like a mountain, even though it's not as big as somebody else's mountain technically, but it may feel like a mountain to you, and that's valid. And with our experiences, we have choices when we were faced with trauma or obstacles. We have the choice to whether we want to take that and focus on the negative and focus on the things that seem really difficult and daunting, and something that maybe you feel can't ever be overcome. Or you can focus on remaining positive and learning to train your mind to go back to the positivity, because it's easy um, to focus on some of the bad stuff. But as I once heard, negative thoughts attract negative thoughts, and positivity also attracts positivity. And so applying that into your everyday life or even in trauma, it makes sense. There was a moment that I remember on a commute to get my license renewal because, on top of my kid having cancer, I had to go sit for hours to get my license renewed, literally within weeks of that. And I just remember having this aha moment when I was listening to a podcast, and it basically said something along those lines. And I remember thinking to myself, I could sit here in the crummy feeling of all this, but it's not making me feel any better. So something's got to change. And I can't change anything else going on in my life, but I can change how I try, at least, to change my perspective on something and to try and, I hate saying make lemonade out of lemons, but essentially, how can I survive this situation and still learn a lesson and maybe help other people overcome their obstacles as I'm going through mine? And so rallying around other people that are going through the same thing and finding positive people, because it is easy to be surrounded by people that will bring you down and make you fearful and more anxious. But I would
call
say
them crabs in a bucket. You know how if you got crabs in a bucket, one tries to escape and the others literally pull it down. If you're around that kind of environment, then you can't kind of change, because for things to change, we have to change, right? But
yeah.
That's a really great message. Really, really great message.
Well,
I wish you all the best for your family. I really do. And we might do a part 2 in a couple of months and see if you've made that Disney trip. It might be more than a few months in the US for Disney. We're not quite sure yet, are we?
Yeah. I'm like, you might be waiting. We've been told that for Make-A-Wish and our chapter, it might take 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
So yeah. So
wow.
we're trying to figure out, if we do it. I mean, I'm pushing to go before we go. I'm like, come on, honey, we got to live, seize the day, right? Live for today. Tomorrow is never promised. Take advantage of good times now, and that's kind of my outlook and perspective on our life right now. So my husband's having to reel it in, because I'm just like, we're going to Colorado, we're going to go to Alaska, we're going to Florida, we're going everywhere. And he's like, there's still COVID out there. I'm like, so, but yeah.
I love your hopes and dreams for the future. And I know that your families, seeing light at the end of the tunnel. You've overcome such a, amazing journey, an in-depth, a heartfelt journey. And I wish your son all the best for his full recovery and for his upcoming surgery as well. And I would love to, in 6 months or so, do a part 2 with you to see where you're sitting with your family. I know our audience would have drawn inspiration, and any family that's going through cancer treatment with their children as well, there's probably a lot of inspiration they can draw from your words today. So I very, very much like to thank you for being brave, for sharing your story. You're so appreciated. And really thank you, Adriana, because those inspirational words will really help people, especially mums, and mums with their kids. Yes, the dads as well, but there's a different connection. 100%. So you can find our podcast on YouTube and the Facebook group Victim to Victory podcast series. If you got value from today, please connect with Adriana. We'll share her links as well. Please subscribe, like and comment to our YouTube channel, and to find us on Apple Podcasts. And I'd like to leave you all with a message today of step into your story, figure out who you are, and do it on purpose. Thanks, Adriana.
Thank you so much.